Well, some of my best questions come after the session is over. So as you were kind of thinking over things and reflecting a little bit about what we talked about yesterday with what coaching is, and thank you to each of you for just kind of sharing a quick thought on uh, what you picked up out of yesterday. But anything hanging for you that we can kind of talk about a little bit before we jump into this next section? Everybody able to get onto that 501 companion okay?
I haven't tried yet
You
on my
haven't tried? That's fine. That's fine.
I,
You
I
know,
had two logistic questions, Ken.
yeah,
On that the teachable that we logged in to
yeah,
yesterday,
yeah.
um, it says that 0 is complete. Do we need to go through those videos in order to get
No,
sure? Okay,
those are just there for you.
okay.
So you can choose to do and look at any particular ones you want to, and you'll always have the availability to it, to where you can go back and refer to something, and maybe even look at something in a different way than what we talk about it. Um, for example, we're going to talk about the hourglass model today. Well, I'll probably give you a different perspective or another perspective to look at it than what Chad and gosh, my mind just went blank. Um,
Brian.
Chad and Brian, yeah, Chad and Brian, woo! Um, Chad and Brian reflect on it, and so, but it give you something later on, just like the videos we'll have of these classes. You've always got them available to you. Not only are there videos on there, though, there are also some different. There's some demos you saw. They're not just video demos. Some of them are recorded videos where you can go back and listen if you want to kind of get a reflection on how either Brian or Chad, or they may even have some other demos of people who are just coaching, just to get some different perspectives. And then there's just some different. I think there's a particular one on questions, number of questions you can use, so that PDFs that you can download, and that's yours. That's yours to kind of work and do with however you want to. All right. So
The second question I had was the Zoom recording from the first session yesterday that I came in late on. I think you gave logistics on next steps from here. Is it
yeah,
possible to get that recording so I know what I missed?
you're gonna get it.
Okay.
The challenge I have is I have to go in and edit it, and what I mean by editing it is not this morning, but I got on the video yesterday, for example, or on Zoom about 20 minutes before we started, and was doing some checking some things out, and I try to clip that, get that out. I was hoping to have that to you last night. I just
Oh
got
no,
worn out and didn't want to deal with it.
that's all
So
right.
that's
I don't
that's the
expect you to
honest
work all
truth.
night.
So
I don't
so it's
expect you to
coming.
work all night. Yeah.
It's coming. The other thing is I didn't really deal a lot with next steps. We'll talk about tomorrow morning. We'll deal with that as much tomorrow as we did yesterday. We talked a little bit about it, but not enough to really make a difference. You'll get more stuff about it tomorrow, about if you want to do more with this, what are some next steps you can take? Okay. Good question. But and I hope that's the only word I'm going to use, is hope, that by the end of tonight I'll have that first session done and to you. So
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Ken.
yeah. I part of the reason I wanted to really do it yesterday was because it would have also helped you know a little bit more about everybody else in the class, where you could have, find out about Mark and why he has dogs hanging around his house, and he's not on the screen, so I'm hoping that means he's not hearing everything I'm saying, um, or other elements like that. So, but sometimes the best of plans don't always work out the way I thought they might. The honest truth is, I didn't take my computer home last night. I was just so tired of looking at the computer. I just said I'm not going to do it tonight. So that's kind of where I left it. Anything else? I mean, any other kind of questions that came up? One of the you know, some of you said it in your responses. One of the things that always kind of catches people, not catches, but kind of the think a lot about in terms of what makes coaching different is really come from the perspective of it's about the agenda of the client, and the client is the expert in some of those things. And that's a whole lot easier to talk about than it is to do, you know. And that's the fun that we'll have as we kind of practice a little bit today. I've been doing this for 20 years now, and I still struggle with some of the competencies they talk about, because of the natural need, need's not the right word, the natural propensity I have, I guess. Oh, that's a big word. To want to insert myself in the story, you know. And one of the things that you try real hard to do in coaching is let it stay about helping the client to discover rather than you teaching them or discovering something for them. Now we'll talk about how, by the way, so don't fret yet. There is a sense, there is a time when you will feel something that you or think something that it is appropriate to make a response. So it's not that you're dismissing the idea of ever introducing an idea to a client. It's just you hold yourself back to let the client do it first, and then you'll have a chance at the appropriate time to respond. And we'll talk more about that as we go along. Mark, you didn't hear all those things I said about you, did you? No. let me, I've got a drink close by. I'm going to be struggling with this cough today. I thought I had gotten through it, but seems to be still lingering on. So we'll see how that kind of helps us, or I have to deal with it as we kind of move along here a little bit. Let me just, for a few minutes, and I like I told you, I like to sometimes have the screen open or so you can see some slides, but a lot of times I like to just bring it back to where we're talking, all five of us together. So sometimes, and I'll go ahead and give you permission to know this, sometimes I will be talking about slides and I will have forgotten to share them. It's called getting older and forgetting to do some things. Or sometimes I think I am, especially when we get to demos, I like to turn the slides off so the people can just see each other as they're talking. And sometimes I forget to do that. So y'all have permission to remind me when I am showing slides when I don't want to, and those kinds of things. So right now you should be seeing our slide that just talks about what we're going to talk about today. Main thing we're going to talk about in this session is this first coaching model. And if you got a chance to watch the video last night, you got a picture of that. Did any of you get to look at either of the video, did the demo or I know, okay, and that's normal. That's the hard thing about the fast track. If I had you doing this once a week for an hour and a half, you'd have plenty of time to do some of the homework. But when you're doing this in fast track world, when you get through with it on, you go, you want me to look at something else, you know? So I hope that you'll take the chance after we're over, that you'll go through that companion and look at those couple of these pieces that we were talking about. So, but we'll talk a little bit about topics for coaching and how that fits into the role of ministry a little bit. We'll talk about the coaching process with spending some time talking about the hourglass. And then I want to make sure that I'm spending time, or that I get our time situated to where Krista and I have the opportunity of coaching you for a few minutes. So let's just keep going and jump in a little bit and start with a little thought pattern here a little bit. You know, sometimes what I get into, and this was true for me when I first got involved in coaching, my big question in my mind was, what do I want to be coached around? You know, what are topics, what are things, what are ideas that are going on around in terms of my life, my ministry, as a minister or um, as a church member, as a Christian, what are things that I would really want to kind of lay out there for somebody else to kind of be helping me think through? And by the way, I didn't say this yesterday, and I do this. I think one of my favorite phrases for being a coach is that what I am as a coach is I am a thinking partner. Bob Dale, who was on our staff and was my seminary professor um, and friend for years, is the one who labeled that for me. And I think he had read it in another resource. But I've often held on to that as far as what I am as a coach. I am a partner who's coming alongside someone, but what I really am is a thinking partner, someone who's trying to help someone else think about what are the next steps they need to take. And so that's kind of another way to kind of hold on to what coaching is. Let's do this for just a minute. There's just the four of us, but I think it would be good, and I'm not going to do this in any kind of order other than the randomness of um, whatever our friends at Zoom do for us. I'm gonna move us into two groups. I think the groups are going to be Kristen, you and Sherry, and then Mark, you and Mike. You're going to go into a breakout room, and I want to give you about 5 minutes. And what I'd like you to think about, look on page, I think it's page 12. Two questions on that page. What are the top challenges for ministry leaders today? I'd love to get, we don't, there's not an answer for this, but just think about what are some of the big topics or challenges that we in ministry face today? And what are some of the objectives do you think most of us as ministry leaders are working on? And let that be kind of a way to start us with thinking about the kinds of things that we could be that we could be coached around. So just start with those two questions. What are the top challenges and what are the overall objectives? And I'm not going to give you long, so you'll have to do brainstorming on this. Brainstorming is just not doing a lot of discussing about it, just kind of think together about what some of the answers to these are. You'll have 5 minutes, and at the end of 5 minutes, you know what the room's going to do, right? It's going to give you the signal that says you've got about 15 seconds. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. Let's see if I can. 30 seconds after that 5 minutes to come back to the main room, and we'll talk a little bit about your answers. All right. So let's see if I can make this work. You should have a little thing that says join your breakout room. Mark, do you see a join for yours? Well, welcome back. Don't you just love abrupt ends? That's the one that's the one thing that Zoom allows you to do, is whether you like coming back or not, you're coming back.
I agree. It's my only thing I like about Zoom classes when I'm teaching better than live is I don't have to be mean. It just does it.
Zoom is the one that's mean, not you, Kristen.
That's right.
Well, let's share some ideas together. And what may be good for us to do is just go from one to the other. What's some of the top challenges that you think are happening? Kristen and Sherry, what's the top challenge you guys were talking about? I know there's more than one, but what's one of them?
Kristen, I like the one you said first. Do you remember the one you said first?
Engage people beyond just filling a pew.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one. There you go.
We also said getting your congregation to be more involved in scripture outside of Sunday, and just investing more in, scripture in your day-to-day activity.
Okay. All right, guys, what's one or two you guys had?
We talked about the rate of change.
Yeah.
And how it's accelerated.
Man. Isn't that a big one? I mean, and it's so fast that we don't know what to do.
And churches hate change to begin with. So the fact that it's happening faster is much harder.
Well, as long as churches are dealing with people, we will have a hard time with change, because we as people have a hard time dealing with it sometimes. We were laughing about it yesterday and saying the older we get, the harder we have with, it doesn't matter what age you are. When you have to change something significant, it can be difficult. You have a little bit more propensity to it when you're younger, but still it's hard, What else?
Leading leaders who don't want to be led.
Boy, we're getting into the biggies. Yeah, that's especially challenging older established congregations, and but it can be true in a lot of places. Really, it can be true in newer churches too, right, Mike? I mean, there are a lot of people who like to do their own thing.
We even said like modern technology, online versus in person.
Yeah.
Particularly post-COVID, how re-engaging people.
Yeah. All right. What else? I mean, and you can go into the second question too. What are some of the roles and objectives that we have that are significant for us in terms of ministry?
Well, Michael was talking about moving to a missional mindset.
Yeah.
Moving from, the member mindset to a missional view of the world. That wherever we are, we're having to learn culture again and how to communicate.
Yeah, anytime we're having to change our mindset.
Live and have our...
What else?
Kind of in that same vein, but not exactly the same, is redefining what success in ministry looks like. It's not Nichols noses, it's impact, it's disciple making.
Okay. Especially in a different world. Because it is so different. There is a reality that it is an objective that the Lord has called us is to make disciples.
Right.
The challenge is how do you do it in this type of world? And a real challenge that many of our churches are having is, besides the people, is that many of our people, even who were trained in ministry, were trained for a different world. And so how we negotiate that and how we learn in that kind of setting is a big thing to think about.
I think that even ties into just stirring the passion. We said the passion of the hunger, the growth for people, for Jesus Christ. I mean, it ties in similar.
You know, there is just no doubt that the objective remains for us to make disciples. The objectives remain to us to be witnesses in this kind of world that we live in. I mean, the Lord calls us to be, you shall be witnesses. He didn't say only in the first century, you know, and that the reality is that we have a, like Mark, you were talking about, that you and Mike had talked about, we have a mission, and we need to have a mission mindset, and this whole, you know, the need to witness and share the gospel has not changed. What has changed around us is the environment and the other things that we've got to work in the context of. And even, you know, how do we lead people to worship in the midst of this hybrid kind of world that we live in?
Right.
With modern technology, and you know, how do we move? Somebody said it, I think, in one of these things. I think it was the first one y'all talked about, Kristen and Sherry. You know, we got to move people outside of the building to think about how they are witnesses and involved in ministry every day of their lives. You know, is a significant part of it as well. Well, I mean, we could go on, couldn't we? I mean, we could keep talking about these kinds of things and not exhaust the kinds of things that we have the opportunity to be involved in, depending on your situation. All these kinds of things that we're adjusting are things that are not, there's no easy answers to them. And the significant part of us in ministry is, who do we have that can help us think about where the Lord is leading us and what's next? And I would suggest to you that's part of the real value of what coaching can bring. It's an opportunity to have an engagement and a conversation with people about these kinds of things to kind of to move the conversation on. Now I'm going to see if this comes up. Let's see if I'm not going to really kind of, thought I was going to try to type something in here. When I have dual monitors, I can do this a little bit easier. I can when I'm just using the one, like I'm doing right here at my office. But you know, I mean, think about now the aspect of, so what are topics that we could be coached around? You know, for example, somebody told me one day, you know, they said, because they were constantly, I mean, they were doing some things, learning about coaching and other things. One of their constant things was, I don't have anything else to be coached on. And I looked at him and I said, you've got it all figured out?
That's right there what they need to be coached on.
Yeah. And we looked at each other and they laughed and they said, well, I guess you're right. I guess there's always plenty to be coached on. And I said, look, I haven't found anybody yet who has figured out life and figured out everything. And I said, there's always something that we can be coached on. Whether we're open to being coached on the topic is another issue. But there's lots of topics. For example, for me, when I'm thinking about topics, one of the immediate things that comes up for me are issues around time management, or issues around, of course, because of my life circumstance and story, is legacy and how to finish well. I've got topics that I can be coached on. I'm trying to figure out how to write a book. I mean, these are all just topics that easily just kind of flow from my conversation. I'm trying to learn how to use AI in a positive way for what I am trying to accomplish, AI being artificial intelligence. Well, that's a topic that I had with my coach one day. You know, I hear all the negative things about AI, but what are some ways I could use it to help me rather than just being scared of it? And those are just a few samples of I don't have a ministry assistant, so one of the things that one of my coaches that my coach was talking to me about the other day was, so how are you going to take care of all these administrative demands if you don't have somebody helping you? I'm the one who brought it up. The coach didn't bring it up. I brought it up, and then use that as a topic for different kind of things. Now, as you think about all these things that we've just talked about, objectives, challenges, and those kind of things, what other topics could you or I be coached on, do you think? Let's just throw some of them out there. I would type all these out, but it's just too complicated. So we'll just write them down as you hear them. I listed some of mine.
Mm. I think one thing I struggle with is, you know, again, being new to all of this, is how to not become, I'm very emotionally driven, so how to not become emotionally vested in people and like bring it home, or you know, not, how can I learn to have boundaries and separate that?
Boundaries, boundaries and separate. Yeah, that's a great topic for conversation, you know. And in some ways, even out of that one, Sherry, there's probably several different kinds of things around boundaries that you could that you could learn. I mean, one of the things we're going to talk about with the hourglass in just a couple of minutes is how sometimes the topic may start very big, and how you have to narrow the topic, and you find out you've got several different things. I mentioned time management. Think how many different topics under time management there are. You know, I mentioned legacy or finishing well. Think about all the different topics there are for me in my journey around that particular piece. What else? I'm gonna take this off the screen so I can see you. I don't like seeing screen.
I thought of life seasons and
Sure.
transitions.
Yeah. A big one in when I'm, if you ever have a chance, and most of you are in ministry settings or spouses of ministers, one of the constant challenges I had in ministry is how to continue to invest in this place, and when is the right time to possibly be open to doing something different. I mean, that's a big one sometimes, you know. How do you see the opportunities? Now, one of the things that I was reading a coaching book the other day, and one of the words they kept constantly using is, you're helping people with their problems. And I thought, well, you know, it's not just about problems. Sometimes it's about opportunities.
Right.
You know, Mike, when you're working with people in the church planning world, for example, some of those kind of situations you're talking about, think about the opportunity that is here in this new plant. Or Kristen, Cherry, I mean, being even in an established kind of setting, think about, instead of just thinking about the problems, what are the opportunities that are here, you know, for the gospel, I mean, and that's one of the things that I really try to make an emphasis of, is that in coaching, it's not just, because I've had several people say to me, well, I don't need a coach. I don't have any problems that are significant enough. And I said, well, first of all, that says to me more that you need a coach than you realize. But second, coaching is not about problems. It's about helping you think about the opportunities and how you're going to respond to those opportunities. You know, how do I respond to the hybrid kind of worship experience that we're dealing with now? How do I handle, listen, 2024 is another election year. Guess what? Got a lot of conversations coming up about probably around how do we handle the politics and the other kinds of stuff in our in this world, and having a confidential voice of just expressing sometimes not only the frustration. Sherry, you're talking about being an emotional person, just sharing the emotion of what I'm feeling, but then from that thinking about what stance can I take and what do I do. Having that thinking partner can help me be able to respond to many of those situations. And the list goes on. I think there was a song about that in the 60s, or something like that. But something goes on. And so the list kind of works. But you kind of get the idea. I mean, I think there is always something that that is a topic out there that people can be invested in. One of the challenge we have opportunities at times to coach some people in a couple of our ministry settings, and they're put into coaching even though they're not investing anything in coaching. In other words, and I'm not saying that correctly, but for example, our process called Uptick, where we're working with young adults in ministry, they're assigned a coach and they work with a coach. And one of the real challenges for them sometimes is to think about, well, what I want to get, what do you mean have a coach? And their struggle sometimes to think about, what can I talk about? And then when they learn, well, what are you thinking about? What are you working on? As I said to one of them the other day, as they were thinking about what they want to, I said, what's keeping you up at night? You know, what makes you not digest your meal well? You know, I mean, there's all kind of different ways to kind of start a conversation. Because if you think about it, we all have those places, those opportunities and challenges that can create some where I need to have just somebody to talk to express something with. Kristen, when y'all are in crisis situations, you know that there are some natural things that come up in that kind of setting. But even for somebody who is in a positive moment, just having help in thinking through things can be very positive stuff. Mark, were you going to say something or ask something? Or
It was. I apologize for dropping out there, and you may have covered this. You have mentioned a couple of times the transition that lingers out in front of you. Carrot. Does that make sense?
Well, you went in and out as you were talking,
and that
so.
is that's my life. Is this better?
Oh, you're fine.
No.
I mean, it was just the.
Go ahead, and I'll come. All right. The
Try turning
idea
your
of
camera off.
transitioning, even within ministry.
Mark, try turning your camera off and see if you can be heard better, because it almost seems like your broadband, your speed's not working as well.
Is that any better?
Yeah.
It's not working as well, and that's why I had to change the location.
Yeah,
and I'll work on that. But the idea of transition within ministry, to see your vocational lifestyle
oh
change
gosh, yeah,
come to an end. And
listen,
and to be honest, that's what I'm facing a lot of. So.
yeah. Well, and that's what I was saying, that one of the biggest things a lot of people, and you know, we're facing in our in the reality of the culture that we're in right now, that there are a large number of people that are our age mark and are having to make decisions about, what do I do next?
Right.
And the reality is we don't want to retire from ministry. We want to find continued ways that we can make a difference for the kingdom in what we do, but we know we may not be able to do it in the same setting that we're doing at the present moment. Well, that's a great conversation piece for things with a either from any kind of coach, but there are even specific people who work on those kind of transitions. I have a friend who the only kind of coaching he does is conversations with people about transitions that they're going through. That's a niche he has developed. And
Okay.
And when he did that, Mark, he said, when he first went into it, he said, do you think that could be a niche that would work? And I said, well, let's just think about that. What are different transitions that people go through? Because the only one he was thinking was retirement. And I said, so what are other niches that people or other transitions that people go through? And I said, let's just brainstorm that and think about it. And we came up a list with 30 without blanking. I mean, without
yeah.
even blinking an eye. I said, it doesn't all have to be about retirement. You know,
True.
Christian,
True.
you and Scott will face a transition of moving to empty nest here in the next few years.
Yes.
That's a significant transition for a
Mhm.
lot of families. We don't think of it as being one, but what we think about a lot of times is, and I'm on this soapbox right now, by the way, because Teresa and I just transitioned out of this, but or moved from that. But what happens is we think about the young adults who are not going to church anymore. You know, I am convinced that a lot of adults who are going into empty nest are dealing with the same issue. It's just we don't talk about it as much. Because what happens for
Yeah.
many of them is once they become free and their young people are not going to youth activities anymore and they're not doing other things and they have more freedom of their schedule, you know, part of what they're struggling with, how do I engage in the church without having young people as a part of my, you know, I mean, it's a different kind of experience. That's one of many transitions that people face, you know, that become a way for conversation. So you're right on target with that. Point is that there's so many topics to be kind of worked on. The key ingredient is how do you really kind of help people think through that? And we'll keep talking about that. I mean, that's the $1 million question that when we get tomorrow morning to what do you do next, one of the things we'll talk about is how do you find people to coach? Well, you can't just put out a shingle and say, hey, I'll coach you, you know, because they don't come running. But what you have to do is have some ability to be able to say, what are you thinking about? And how can I be a partner with you as you're thinking about these issues that are important for you? And we'll talk more about that as we kind of move along. Quick comment before we move to the hourglass and the coaching process a little bit. I did not refer to page 10 and 11 in your notes, which is the Christian and coaching, the coaching and Christian coaching piece that's on that page. It's not, that's really more of a reference page. Jane Crest will put that together when she was talking about, so what's the difference between a coach and a Christian coach? And the most significant part of that I take from that is if you look at it, it's a recognition that the Lord calls us to be even beyond what a regular coach would be. That's part of his call of ministry and focus. And that's what she's trying to call attention to in that particular passage of scripture. She talks about some of the things that make people good coaches, and then talks about how the Lord's call is even to something beyond that. So use that as a kind of a reference piece as much as anything else. What makes a conversation a Christian coaching conversation rather than just a regular coaching conversation is, like we talked about yesterday, a regular coaching conversation, there's not going to be a lot of thought about God in that process. In a Christian coaching process, there are 3 people in our conversation, not just 2. You know, there is us, the client, and the Lord himself that's a part of the conversation. That's the significant part of what makes Christian coaching so significant. By the way, I mentioned Tim Galway yesterday as the one who wrote the first book on the inner game of work, and that the first Christian person I ever saw write on coaching. Do any of y'all, Mike, maybe you and Mark would know this name. Gary Collins was a professor of counseling, or I guess that's what I would call it, professor of counseling, and I don't remember where he was a professor, but he wrote many books on pastoral care, and he very well known in the pastoral care world. He's the first one that I ever saw write a book on Christian coaching. And until his death just a couple of years ago, Gary would always do 2 things in the newsletter that he sent out. He would do a thing on a counseling piece, and he would do a thing on a coaching piece in the newsletter. He would always have 2 elements. And he kind of is the first one who kind of gave an opportunity for Christians to start looking and thinking about how coaching could impact our lives as believers. Others had been thinking it, but Gary was the first one to kind of write something. I think the book now is in its second or third edition. Like I said, it's just called Christian Coaching. And is it one of his best books? Probably not, but it does give kind of a foundation for some things about coaching that it's the first one I ever read about coaching. And so that's what makes me remember it as well. Look on page, we're going to jump to process now a little bit, and we're going to look at the model, the hourglass model. I would encourage you to go back and watch the video that Chad and Brian have put together on this. But if we look at it, Jane, when she was trying to describe for someone what coaching looks like, what is a coaching conversation, or when I have a coaching appointment with someone, what's it look like? And she used the picture of an hourglass. You know, every time I see the picture of hourglass, you know what I think of? My grandmother watching The Days of Our Lives, that soap opera, you know, because every day we visited from 12:30 to 1:30, she said, "Now, boys, you can do whatever you want to do, but Granny's got to watch her show here," you know, and that kind of thing.
As the hourglass turns,
yes,
that's what they used to
so
say.
do the days of our lives, you know. And but Jane thought the hourglass gave a great picture of what happens in a coaching conversation. And what I'd want you to get the picture of with this, as you can see, what happens at the top is you're starting big. You're starting with big questions. Questions like, well, what do you want to work on today? What are you thinking about today? What do you want to focus our conversation around? That's a big, I mean, it could be lots of different things. I was working with somebody the other day, and here was their topic. Well, I think I want to talk about the outreach of the church. Now, that's a pretty big topic to talk about outreach of the church. And so what you do in the conversation is you start big, and just like in the hourglass, how the sands narrow, what you try to do is you start big and you continue to narrow the conversation to where you get to a point where you center it on a specific focus. So the illustration is outreach. I'm going to work on outreach today. We talked for a while and we said, well, what are different elements of outreach that are important to you? That's still up in that top, clarifying, focusing the conversation. And he talked about different things. And then finally, when we got to try to narrow it, my thing is, all right, you've got all these topics that are important to you. What do you want to walk away from this conversation today that's going to be the most impactful for you around outreach for your church? Now, I narrowed it because I was asking him specifically, what do you want to walk away with? Or what's something specific we can kind of work on? Sometimes what you can do when you narrow it could be they've named 4 or 5 things that are important. Well, out of those 4 or 5 things, what's the one thing you want to work on today? And so, and if they name the one thing, like, and I won't go into great detail because any of these, you know, all these are prepared by, I protect confidentiality standpoint, but there's an aspect where what I said and what we kind of dealt with is he was dealing with all these things. And then finally he said, you know, I think what I want to talk about is how do I get more people involved in sharing the love of Christ with our community? I said, all right, so let's work on that. And so that was the narrow focus. And then we opened up the conversation to talk about, all right, when we finish this conversation, how will you have decided something that's going to help you know that you've helped people to see that need? And he stood there and thought about that. I mean, literally, we got silent for a good number of seconds. He said, I hadn't thought about that part of it. And I said, well, that's part of what we're trying to do here. Think, what is it going to take? What are people going to, how are you going to know that people are going to be engaged in outreach when we finish this conversation? And so in some ways we were narrowing the conversation a little bit more. Well, by the time we finished and he started, and I said, so what options do you have for getting people engaged? And he started talking about different things that he was thinking about. And with one of them, I even made, well, and he got to 2 or 3. And this is what I want you to hear. I even then asked him, well, I have an idea. Would it be okay with you if I share this idea with you? I know this is about you and your things, but I have this idea. What do you think? He said, oh, sure. I've yet to have anybody tell me they didn't want to hear an idea, by the way. But asking permission gives me the permission to kind of say, here's something to think about. So I gave him an idea. And then I said, what do you think about that idea? And here's what he said. Well, that might have worked for you, but I don't think that would work for me. All right. Now, there's a couple of ways to kind of respond to that. One way to respond to that is, oh, yeah, it works. What do you mean? You know, I've done this many times. But the better way to respond to this, okay, I just had that idea, thought it might be one to think about. What other things do you think about? Because what it did, it then gave him more thinking that he was doing about things that would work in his situation. One of the things you've got to be as a coach is humble enough to recognize that everything you think about may not work for that person. But giving them your ideas may spur other ideas for them. You know, sometimes the idea, they may take it and say, wow, I love that idea. You never know. You just have to be comfortable with that because, again, remember, it's about helping that person think, not about getting your idea in front of them. When we finished, he had some specific actions that he had decided he wanted to try. And in fact, and we'll talk about how you notice that bottom says exploring, identifying, and aligning actions with focus. He came up with a specific action that he wanted to do. We talked through that action and what he was going to do to accomplish it. And I even set up some accountability pieces for him. So who's going to help make sure that this gets done? And we'll talk about this more when we get into the questions. I'm trying to really just kind of help you with process more than anything else. You start big, you narrow, then you open it back up for options, possibilities until you come up with kind of some firm actions that they're going to take to kind of help with the process. That's the hourglass model. All right. By the way, there are other models to structure a conversation, and we're going to look at them this afternoon. We're going to look at some other conversations, but this is just one that kind of gives you an overall picture of what takes place in a conversation. All right. In the video, Chad and Brian both talk about, if you look, there's a top and a bottom to the hourglass thing. The top is recognizing that one of the things you're having to build with the client is trust. Trust is a foundation in many ways for whether you're going to be able to get to some of these places. Trust and willingness. And the bottom is that sense of accountability. What kind of commitment are people willing to make to really follow through with the actions and the things that are being talked about? All right, let me give you an illustration of the hourglass. And the illustration of the hourglass is going to be, Chris and I are going to talk for about 15 to 20 minutes around a coaching piece. And so Sherry and Mike and Mark, what I would encourage you to do, if you, let's see, I do have one video I can show you that, I mean, not video, but slide that to make you, to help you think about this just a little bit. Let's see, this is that thing I was showing you yesterday. What I want you to do is just listen to me and listen and notice what seems to be working in the conversation and see if you can, what's one thing that worked and maybe one thing that you think could have worked better. There is no perfect coaching conversation. One of the things that I always say to people when we're doing these kinds of demos, sometimes you hit it home run, sometimes you help the person, but you can tell that if I had only asked this later, you're constantly evaluating and doing those kinds of things. And how well you know the person and how willing the person is to address things are things a part of this as well. So what I'm trying to give you is just an illustration. Don't worry about Kristen. Worry about Ken. All right. You're going to have or maybe you may be different. The way most of us respond to these demos is we want to tell Kristen, here's what you ought to do. All right. But let that go and just pay attention to me and how I am doing and following the hourglass model. All right. Start big, narrow it, and then open the conversation back up a little bit. All right. Does that make sense? Hopefully this will be these things that I'm going to do with each of you, and then giving you the chance to practice it some tomorrow, hopefully will be helpful. Also today, by the way, you're going to coach me, which will be a real treat. Let's see how this works. All right. So what I would say, Sherry and Mike and Mark, if y'all don't mind, how about if y'all would just take your video off so that it's just Kristen and I looking at each other on this video. And Kristen, you may even feel more comfortable with the video. It doesn't matter to me, but we're gonna talk. We're gonna have a coaching conversation, and we'll work from there. And I'm gonna watch the time as carefully as I can. We may not even get all the way through, okay?
Right.
Because when you're doing these shorter versions, we may get into something, but I'm gonna try to lead you through a process as best I can. But if we can't, hopefully I can at least give you something to think about as the next step that you will take and that kind of thing. All right. Kristen, thank you for doing this. First of all, what could we work on today that might be helpful for your thinking?
Well, we wrote a grant proposal for like $1.2 million to create a program.
Woo.
And then it didn't get funded. And so now I'm trying to figure out, because it was kind of my baby, how to take the Rolls Royce that we wrote and take it down to a Honda Civic that we can actually implement without $1.2 million in funding. Looking at how to use the principles of asset-based community development to help churches engage their local community in ways that make sense, that don't come across as we have all the answers that we are giving to you, but partner with community, trying to answer some of that. How do you connect in a post-COVID world with people who aren't going to walk in your doors? Yeah. And I'm stuck, partly disappointment over not getting the grant, partly doing other things that take priority because it's the day-to-day stuff. So making it a priority to work on that and then pitch it to Dean so that we can actually pitch it further up the chain and implement it.
You can't help but be disappointed about something like that, especially when you put so much time and energy into it. And, you want to say, what were y'all thinking? This is a great idea.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
and the ego gets involved, which then,
Yeah. Good old ego kind of keeps us all going. What most excited you about the project, though, that you had put down? I mean, you list some of the things that were involved in it. What were the results you were looking for from it from the long run?
Well, part of it was, I think it would work in my church has been, spent a lot of years navel gazing and getting into emotional trouble as a church, and is finally getting to a healthy place and might be ready for something like that. So, because of course I impose my own context, but I think a lot of churches are in that situation, and they don't know how to reach their community because they're all working from that 1950s to 1980s model of if you build it, they will come. Yeah. And that attractional model is not working anymore, but they don't have the tools for what comes next. Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to help bring them that. And I just think it's a really cool idea.
So if you had gotten the money, what were the steps that were going to be involved?
Recruiting 6 to 10 churches, like teams of 5 to 8 leaders, including a couple of staff members and key lay leaders in peer groups to learn about what asset-based community development is,
Okay.
to develop discipleship materials so that the church is spiritually ready
Mhm.
to engage their community, because dealing with the world who aren't saved is a whole different thing than dealing with people who get themselves cleaned up and come in at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. And then helping them like map their community, figure out who potential partners are, how to engage with those people as equals and not something else, how to engage perhaps with even a not overtly Christian organization as a ministry partner,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then start actually doing the work. So
Those are some really great things. I really wish you would have
I
had the
know.
chance to have gotten that kind of worked on. So where are you stumped right now? I mean, you said you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, I
What's
think
got you stumped?
partly because there's not a easy mechanism for, hey, I want to start something new. Like some of it is my own sense of empowerment, I think. Where I think, if I'm thinking logically, probably if I were to say, here's the plan, let's run with it, there would probably be some open doors there. But funding, honestly, is, to rethink how to, part of the reason I initially was interested in coaching is we were thinking we're going to have coaches meet with these groups of people.
Right.
But that of course costs money, and gathering people together for a retreat to do some training is expensive. Getting people to buy in when they don't understand it yet, so that, and just knowing that a lot of churches don't have the resources to do these kinds of things without some assistance. And just getting my head past, we built this great program and now we got to scale it back. And is it even worth it if it's this small,
What do you believe in your heart as
It's
far as the
definitely
worth?
worth it.
The
Oh,
worth.
it's
Yeah. the worth of it.
definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it could work. And, I've started tweaking the concepts a little bit. I've been reading Unstrasser's book, Centering Discipleship.
Yeah.
And I think that those kind of discipleship cores may be a way to approach it in a smaller scale, like, engage core groups of people in churches and kind of focus it that way. But
Who would you have to, I mean, you said that as you're feeling a little bit stuck, and part of the stuckness is finding the funding, right?
Mhm.
I mean, I think
Mhm.
that's part of the stuckness. Part of the stuckness is what, this may not be part of the stuckness, but I'm just, so who would you present something to for the possibility of something, even if it were smaller?
Uh-huh.
That's the question. Is
Uh-huh.
who?
I mean, yeah, I think Dean Miller, who's my direct supervisor, would be obvious first step. But, I think beyond that, I don't know if it's Dean or David or the missions count. I don't know who approves those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And, and in light of who knows what's going to happen in June with the SBC, that could change the whole picture of funding streams within the BGAV. So that's another.
You never know. You never know. And really, you don't know from one year to the next what some of the streams are, just because of the nature of who you're working with as a denominational body. So let's step away from that.
Okay.
Step away from things you can't control, because you can't control that, right?
Right.
I mean, I wished you could, because I know it would come out very well, but you can't.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you control?
I can control creating the plan on paper in a smaller way.
Okay.
I can control making the conversation, at least with Dean, happen.
Okay. Anything else?
I don't know that there's much beyond my. I think it would at that point would have to have some sort of stamp of approval from higher up to start recruiting.
Yeah, I'm not looking for anything. I'm just trying to think out loud with you in terms of what are the things that you can do that would make a difference on this particular project, because what it's easy to do. I mean, I know how I feel lots of times. What it's easy to do is focus on the things you can't do rather than focus on the things you can do.
Because worrying's productive, right?
Yeah. Notice this hair. Notice how gray it's become. It's really very productive, for appearance and everything else. But so we've got about 10 minutes to work together. All right.
Mm-hmm.
What would you like to have made a decision about or walk away with 10 minutes from now that would be most helpful around this particular topic?
Probably a tangible next step that gets me to where I can have a conversation with Dean that leads to a next step.
Okay. A tangible, I'm just writing it down so I keep it in front of me that what we're looking for is a tangible next step. All right. Well, so let's think about what some possibilities are. What are some steps you could take? To get this moving forward. What do you need to do? Not for everybody else, but what do you need to be most comfortable with?
Yeah, I probably need to take the grant proposal back out and slash 2/3 of the funding issues and then figure out what's left that is still doable.
Okay. So what would that take to do something like that?
Setting other things aside and making it a priority of my time of my
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. I mean, I heard a word that I love to hear when people talk about it. I will probably do that. Now, probably means you're not real sure yet whether you're going to do it or not, right? But it's possible is what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
That's one option, is to take that out, take a look at it, and think how you could what's the word you would use? How you could what?
Scale it back, I guess.
Retool it.
Yeah.
Some word like that.
Reimagine.
Reimagine. Reimagine's a good word. You know, reimagine's a good word for it, because you still see the value of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so just thinking it through, well, we don't get the grant, but let's think what are some other ways we could do it. Might be possible, and keeping that kind of thing in front of you could be an important part of that.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other things you could do?
Probably brainstorm some alternate funding streams or have some conversations with people who have access to some alternate funding streams.
Okay. That's always it seems, at least in our kind of world, we're always having to look for alternate funding streams.
That's ministry.
So,
Yeah.
so that could be a part of the process as well. What else?
Making an appointment with Dean so I have a deadline to do it, so it becomes a priority on my calendar.
So yeah, so just making a deadline of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It sounds like you have some similarity to me. Deadlines help.
They do, because otherwise other things are more.
Yeah, I mean, this is not the only thing you're working on, I assume.
Right.
No,
in fact, that's part of my struggle is we set everything aside to write the proposal and then it didn't get funded. So then I'm like, I'm going to lose my job. I am worthless. You know, I mean, I'm not, but you know, that kind of thing.
So what else do you think you could do? We're just talking possibilities here. We're not talking about.
Sure. I mean, it sounds overly spiritualized, but I could pray about it and see
Well,
what God wants us to do.
that makes a difference, because one of the questions that is a natural question in this is, so where is God in this?
Yeah.
Because there is that aspect for all of us, including myself. It's easy to get ahead of the Lord sometimes in the midst of the process, but finding that kind of connection can be an important part. I mean, it's amazing when I look at Scripture, how many times God provided the resources when
it's His plan.
Nobody figured where'd that come from?
Right.
That kind of thing. So yeah, that could be a significant part. I mean, one of the things you talk about in this particular process, I heard you say, is helping those churches with the spiritual connection to engaging things. And possibly this is an opportunity for finding a way, because one of the things that's going to be a part of this too, I sense, if I heard you correctly, is even helping a pastor or helping some leader in the church to gain some sense of spiritual preparation for what God is doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that's part of what this is an opportunity to think through how to engage somebody to find that spiritual connection. So that's another possibility. What else?
I don't know. I mean, I'm reading lots of books always just, trying to glean ideas. And, I find that sometimes it's easier to write when I'm reading other good writers,
Sure.
and,
Sure.
and it inspires ideas in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I probably need to pick up some books that are related.
That's that good probably word again,
Probably, yeah.
which
Which
is
I ought
fine.
to
I mean,
do,
we're just
but
talking
yeah.
possibilities here.
Yeah.
It's just a reminder that the biggest thing we have to get to for you is, and by the way, I live in the probably world every day, so that's the reason I think I'm probably aware of it. But we need to find something that you can move from probably to I am going to do it,
Uh-huh.
right? So, I mean, you talked about 5 different things here, if I figured it right, in just
Uh-huh.
possibilities. What's going to be the one that gets you moving and getting out of the stuckness of this situation?
Probably. There I go again.
That's fine. No,
Now I'm noticing it. A deadline.
okay.
Because since we didn't get the funding, there's not we must start by September, where there would have been.
Mm-hmm.
So without a deadline, I'm not pushing myself. It's easy to put it on the back burner.
Okay. So how do you find your deadline? You mentioned the possibility the deadline was having a deadline by talking to Dean, I think was the thing you meant, or scheduling a meeting. That's what I mean. Scheduling
Right.
a meeting with Dean.
Right.
Is that what you need for a deadline, or
I think so.
is there?
That there's that accountability of I must have it done by this date, because there will be a conversation whether I'm ready or not.
So how long do you need from where you are right now to having this meeting with Dean?
A week or two, I think, would probably, because too much longer and it becomes back burner again, and it ends up being a week or two anyway.
Okay.
So.
Well, part of it too is, of course, it's another one of those things you can't control. You can't
Right.
control his schedule.
Right.
The only thing you can control is your commitment to getting something scheduled with him and then working things from there.
Mm-hmm.
But it is good at the same time, because you could call him today. Hey, let's meet tomorrow.
Right.
You know?
I do have my staff evaluation appointment on Monday, so that at least gives me a chance to talk to him about it. But I don't know that it'll be. But that might be a good interim.
Well, that could be
something.
It could be an interim. That could be part of your step to get the specific date lined
Right.
up and be the deadline. Is
Mhm.
use that opportunity of that meeting on Monday to then work with him. I mean, Monday's March the 18th, I think, is that right? I think something like that. You still there?
I'm here now. It froze for a minute.
That's no problem. It just looked like I was making such an impression on you that I made you
froze
just
me.
freeze. So March the 18th would be the date that you're meeting with him. So what you're saying is the possibility is using that to set up another time?
Right. Or even to have some preliminary ideas to say, hey, this is where I'm thinking. Can we set a date to finalize this so you can take it up?
Okay, good. All right. So, I mean, you've got it. You've got a time that you can at least do it. So what would stop you from doing it?
This class right here.
This class always creates problems, I tell you.
Nothing would stop me from doing it. I just need to make Thursday and Friday about getting that preliminary step ready.
Okay. Could anything, what could get in the way? I mean, nothing you said, but Thursday and Friday are coming up.
Right.
You need to do some steps. What do you need to make sure happens on Thursday and Friday to get this done? I mean, again, and let me make sure I'm following you, because I think what you were saying is anything that you need to do on Thursday and Friday is just preliminary thinking about the larger conversation later. Is that right?
Yes, but I also know the way Dean works. Sometimes it's going to be once I bring it up, that will be the conversation sometimes.
Okay.
So
So you need to do some things to prepare yourself into. So what are some of those things you need to do prepare for next Monday?
I need to break back out the timeline that we wrote for the grant and reevaluate it based on a smaller budget.
Okay.
Rethink the programming steps. Like we can't do a 3-day retreat where we pay for everything. What could we do? Could we, do a 1-day something at the office or regional things, or, kind of the logistics of a lot of it, that how do we scale it back?
Okay.
Um,
So how realistic is that to get that done by
I think
Friday?
probably pretty realistic, because I've been thinking about it. I just haven't sat
Okay.
down and
Okay.
put flesh on the
So what do you need to do to make sure it happens on your schedule on Thursday and Friday?
I need to put it
Thursday
on
and
my, yeah, I need to put it
Right.
on my calendar and block it off as this is what I am doing. And because I've got a fair amount of control over what I do from day to day, as long as the things get done.
Okay.
So I think
You
that's
you
doable.
won't have a class participating in Thursday or Friday, right?
Right.
Get in the way. So it sounds like just getting it scheduled in your own mind, thinking
Mhm.
about what you need to do, and then presenting at least a preliminary idea to him on Monday,
Mhm.
then may lead to a larger conversation in a couple of weeks. And
Yeah.
that you need to do more of the extensive work on it.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like if I can sketch it out,
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be fully written and fleshed out like a proposal would, but enough to talk about it. And then
So what else do you need to help you with preparing for Monday?
I think that's probably, I'm good.
Okay.
This
Okay.
has been helpful.
Okay. Good. Good.
That's
Well,
kind of amazing in that short of a conversation,
yeah.
actually.
So it sounds like you're pretty committed to this. You're going to see this through,
Mhm.
and I'm excited about it for you, because I think, like you said, moving from feeling stuck about it. I mean, I'm with you. I see the real possibilities of this, and just thinking it through to not let it die.
Mhm.
It's an important part of your own thinking. And this gives you a way to kind of revisit that a little bit. So I'm excited for you. I look forward to hearing how that goes. So thank you. Thank you for the time. And let's bring everybody else back. And let's talk about this for just a few minutes before we take a break. All right. What'd you watch going on? With me? No, with I don't mean to kind of shut that off from Kristen as well, but what did you see happening in that? How'd you see the hourglass working in that situation? How'd you
Yeah,
see
you
the
really
top?
kept asking the questions that you asked kept causing her to narrow down her thought process. Because in the beginning, I felt Kristen had just this overwhelming sense of, anxiousness and panic and discouraged. But you were helping her to narrow down by the questions you asked to really get to a step that she could start with
Yeah.
as a baby step to work out.
One of the things I hope I did, and I always have to go back and listen to it again later to see if I really did this or not. Kristen, you can help me with this, but one of the things that you really try to do is not rush to getting to the pinch point. Take the time to explore a little bit. And what I was trying to do a little bit, even with the conversation, though she had a pretty good idea what she wanted to focus on, I did not really jump and immediately say, all right, so what do you want to accomplish by the end of this conversation? Even though we had 15 or 20 minutes, I tried to identify with her disappointment, because she said, I'm really disappointed. And I pick up a lot of times on those feeling words, and identify with them. And if I can, or at least acknowledge that, what that feeling is, and then let us explore a little bit more. I tried to let her explore a little bit more with a question like, so if you had gotten the grant, what would have happened? Now she knew all that, but to go back and revisit it can be helpful to think, because she kept using the word, I'm stuck. Isn't that the word you used? I'm stuck. So Christian, did you feel that in terms of, or see that I was trying to give you room and space there in that top section there to just kind of explore a little bit
Yeah, a little bit.
what might be? What else were you feeling while all this was going on? I should ask you that before I even ask anybody else. What were you thinking?
Was actually really surprised because I thought it would feel more contrived than it did. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, yeah, just that sense of I have been feeling overwhelmed by it and unable to move forward because it felt big. So that helping narrow it to a
Mhm.
manageable step that then kind of busts the dam to okay, then what's the next step and the next step and
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that I, and we'll talk about this more, but one of the things I like to do once a person has an action in their mind is to really kind of help them play out the action. So you might think a coaching session ends with, oh, they have an action. Kristen had a step. Oh, she's got a step. She'll set up a meeting, But part of what you play out with that a little bit is as much as you can. All right, so when will this meeting be?
Well, I think you took too, Ken. I noticed because Chris and I would be a lot like you in that fact of, well, probably. And I like how you really emphasize because she wouldn't get past to making a step if you didn't point out, in my mind, that probably is not definitive. So and I think a lot of times we don't realize that we say that, or we don't realize that
Oh,
we're
I catch. Yeah, I mean, it's really true. I mean, part of my learning on that over the years has been to listen for keywords.
Mhm.
And everybody has different words, but one that I find is a regular part of conversations is the word probably. That's one of them. I call it a yellow flag word
Mhm.
where you just kind of going, I wonder what that means,
Mhm.
and that's why I heard you say probably. Kristen, I think I heard you say that really you were kind of surprised to even have that word brought up.
Mhm.
Because see, that's part of what you're trying to do in coaching is create some awareness for the
Right.
client, for the person you're coaching, of things they are saying they may not even hear themselves say.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's a good example. There's a lot of another one is I can't do that. Or I mean there's a whole we do a whole class on the language of coaching, and we talk about yellow flag words and other things like that. And to me, probably is one of those words. Maybe I'm so familiar with it because I use it so much. Well, I'll probably do that, next week. Or
Mhm.
what it really just shows sometimes is wanting to do it, but not prioritizing it. Just
Mhm.
Kristen, that's what you were feeling it was. But um, because a lot of it has to do with I got so much on my plate, I really want to do it,
Mhm.
but I'm going to have to let something else go to do it. And so that's where we went with it.
Mhm.
So I do think, Sherry, that is one of the things you pay attention to sometimes as a coach. Listen carefully to the words. I hope as we were doing this, I hope you felt yourself listened to, Krista,
Mhm.
in terms of what was going on. I didn't have an agenda for this. I mean, I listen, I love what she's doing, what they're doing. It would have been easy for me to say, well, do this. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? But I let go of that need because I wanted Kristen to explore it because this is her thinking and that kind of thing. That's just an example. And we'll do more of these. The others, and you'll get more. And I don't do these perfectly. I mean, sometimes I'm bad about interrupting a thought or other things. I will even probably intentionally in some of our sessions do something just to see if you catch it and make a comment about it afterwards. But I have figured out I'm not perfect. So you will not be perfect when you have a conversation. The way I look at these is these are conversations with friends, with colleagues, and I really want to do it for the sake of the person, not for my sake. And I think when you take that kind of stance, it can help move things forward. And all right, it's time for our break. When we get back, we will start. I mean, I hope, and again, I hope you saw the hourglass generally in the conversation. That's what the hourglass always kind of serves as kind of a thing I have in my head, but I don't know that I use it as a structure. as much as that I just remember that that's what we're doing, you
Mhm.
know. And if you were asking me, and I think you hear this in there, I probably, if it's a 45 minute conversation that I'm having with somebody, I try to go about 20 minutes in that top part. Try, you know, and I'm just using a general idea, about 5 minutes in that focusing part and about 20 minutes to do the other part. But that's general. Sometimes we can get faster, sometimes, but the key thing I would say to you is don't hurry the top part, because you need to give the person the chance to just kind of express where they are and share some things about it to kind of help them along the way. All right. When we get back, we'll start the skills. We'll talk about listening specifically, and that's the one skill we'll spend more time. And you've all been listening your whole life in ministry. We're just going to talk about honing it a little bit more and how you listen in a coaching conversation that might be different in some other conversations. All right. See you at 10:30. I'll send you notes or the slides for session 4 here soon. All right. See you then. Bye.